Welcome to the Money Metals Midweek Memo, news and commentary relating to sound money, the precious metals markets, and the economy. I'm your host, Mike Maharrey. Thanks for tuning in. So, you know that keep calm, carry on meme? It was real popular a few years ago. I don't see it as much anymore, but you probably remember it. And the meme always had this like royal crown on it, like a king's crown. And it turns out there's actually some history behind this meme. And I had no idea until I Googled it. This meme is based off of a propaganda campaign that was put together by the British government in World War II. It was in 1939, and the British government was just trying to put out the message to the British people. Keep calm. Yes, there's a war brewing, but keep calm and just carry on. Everything's going to be all right. I feel like that meme would be really, really appropriate for a lot of folks in the precious metal space right now, given what's going on. I mean, it's crazy, right? You know, if you had told me even 2 years ago that we would be talking about $5,000 gold in 2026, I would probably have been pretty skeptical and I might have thought you were a little bit over the edge. And yet here we are right now. We have gold trading well over $4,800 an ounce. I think it was $4,876. So we're pushing toward $5,000 right now. We have silver that is trading over $95. And it seems like every single day we have new record prices for both gold and silver. So obviously this has created a lot of buzz, a lot of attention around precious metals, gold and silver. A lot of people are really excited about it. And of course, it also tends to spin up a lot of rumors and conspiracy theories and things like that. And I kind of want to address that today because I think it's important for everybody, and this isn't really just necessarily about precious metals. This is really kind of life, right? You have to keep yourself grounded when things get chaotic around you. And I think that the British propaganda campaign or the meme or however you want to look at it, it's a pretty good advice, right? Keep calm, keep focused, and carry on. I worked in TV news for about 5 years. I think I probably mentioned that on the show before. I produced web content for the NBC affiliate in Lexington, Kentucky. And that station very much prided itself on being this go-to for breaking news. So I have seen up close and personal the evolution of a news story from its breaking to the final report plenty of times. And one thing, you've probably noticed this as somebody who watches news, the initial reports are often wrong, right? If you have a major news event, you know, a fire or a plane crash, natural disaster, oftentimes you'll get very different reports at the beginning than you do towards the end. I'll give you a great example. On 9/11, the very first report that came across the wire was that a small plane had hit one of the towers. I know this because I was working in the control operations center for one of the airlines in Cincinnati on 9/11, and I actually saw it come over the little news type, and that's what it said. A small plane had hit the towers. Well, as we well know, it's not just a small plane, right? But people get very conspiratorial when they see reports change as the story develops. You know, they'll say, oh, they were hiding stuff from us, or they're lying. But I'll be honest with you, it's generally not anything nefarious, right? It's just that information comes in very fragmented and incomplete, especially in a breaking news story. And you have a lot of factors and dynamics that play into that. I mean, eyewitnesses, notoriously bad at remembering what they saw. I remember when I was in college at the University of Kentucky, I was in a psychology class, and we were sitting there, and the professor was lecturing, and all of a sudden, this person runs through the room yelling and throwing things, and then runs out. And then the professor had us all give a description of the person who ran into the room. And it was amazing how widely varying the description was. We're just not good at seeing and remembering things. And then because of that, people jump to conclusions. They make assumptions that later turn out to be wrong. So the reporting changes along the way. And then you add to that the copycat nature of news. That creates a real problem because when one news outlet reports something, others are going to follow the leader, right? Nobody wants to seem like they're behind on the story. And being measured and waiting until all of the facts are in, that does not play well in our modern 30-second news cycle, right? We got to get it out there, right? I had my boss more than once say to me, just get something up. We'll fill in the details as we get them, right? We wanted to be first. We wanted to break that story. And so that's the dynamic that you often see in the world of news. And I was always uncomfortable with this approach. I mean, I get it. If you're doing breaking news, you want to break the news. But maybe it's just me. I'd rather be a little late to the party and get it right the first time. However, like I said, very difficult, nearly impossible in the modern media landscape. And quite frankly, it's gotten even worse as media has become more and more fragmented based on ideology. If you have a certain ideological or political perspective, and we all do, it's easy to jump to conclusions based on those presuppositions. Think about how you would respond if you saw a cop using force on an individual. If you tend to be more conservative, pro-police, thin blue line, rule of law kind of person, you're probably going to default to, I wonder what that guy did to deserve that. Probably didn't follow orders, right? If you're a lefty and you're skeptical of cops and institutional power, you might assume that the guy's getting roughed up. It's just because that's what police do and it's police abuse. So you can see how your presuppositions and your biases are going to actually taint what you see and the conclusions that you draw. I've always said it's impossible to be unbiased, right? We talk about this idea of unbiased news. I don't think that could ever be a thing because we're all human beings. We're all subject to biases. But the goal has always been for me as a journalist to be balanced in my reporting, right? Good journalists do their best to put aside their biases and their assumptions and just report the facts while balancing opinions from both sides. So the goal is to try to tell both sides of the story, even though you may intuitively lean one way or the other. And here's the thing, it's hard to be a good journalist, and they're far and few between. I really want to be a good journalist. Now, I'm not working for a neutral news source anymore. That means I have more editorial license than a true journalist, and I hope people that read my stuff understand that. You should be aware of that when you read my stuff or listen to my pontifications. However, I never want to cross the line into just making stuff up or ignoring important facts just to hype precious metals. I don't want to exaggerate or use hyperbole to scare you into buying gold or silver. I want you to come away with a realistic understanding of what's going on out there in the marketplace, in the economy, so you can make good decisions based on your situations. So that's kind of my goal. So I have my biases. I am on a platform where I have editorial license. So yes, I'm coming at it from a point of view, but I've tried to be honest. And what you hear me say are things that I believe. When my kids were growing up, I really harped a lot about integrity. Integrity is something that is very easy to lose. And when you lose it, it's very hard to get it back. And here's the thing, you have complete control over your own integrity because your integrity is about what you do. So you choose whether or not to be honest. You choose whether or not to keep your commitments. You choose whether or not to admit when you make a mistake. You choose the way that you interact with other human beings. And it's hard because sometimes doing the right thing can be costly. But again, once you lose your integrity, it's very hard to get back. And it's not something that you want to lose. You want people to trust you, right? So I hope if I accomplish nothing else in what life I have left, that I get through it with my integrity intact. Okay, I am driving toward a point here. I know this is a precious metals podcast. I made a mistake. I got caught up in some hype, and I overstated the likely outcome of a policy change. Now, to be fair, I was reporting based on the information that I was getting from sources that I trust. But I got it wrong. Today I'm going to set the record straight. And I also want to inject a bit of caution as this crazy bull market in precious metals continues to play out. The rapid rise in the price of gold, and especially silver more recently, has created an environment ripe for overhype. So before I get into all of that, I do want to take a second. Thank you so much for listening to this show. I say this every week, but I mean it. I really appreciate the fact that you take a little bit of time out of your day to listen. I'm glad that you find value in what we're doing here, and I thank you, and I appreciate it. And I'm going to ask you to do us a favor, if you would. Go to wherever you listen to this podcast and leave a good review. Give us those 5 stars. I mean, assuming you think we deserve 5 stars, maybe 4, but probably 5. But give us those reviews, leave those stars, share these episodes with your friends. If you find value in what I'm saying, maybe other folks will as well. By you doing this, take 3 or 4 minutes. It will help grow the show, make the show better, and it'll make me happy. And if you want to make me happy, right? No, seriously, I do thank you for listening, and if you would do that for us, that would be fantastic. But mostly, just keep listening, and thank you. So, what did I get wrong? Well, maybe not wrong, but I did overstate something. The impact of Chinese silver export rules probably is not going to be as significant as I and many others initially thought. So last week, I reported that China was attempting to basically control the silver market using more restrictive export rules, and that it could exacerbate global silver shortages. And not an unreasonable conclusion, because China has a history of using this strategy. It used a similar strategy to control the markets for other rare earth metals. However, analysis by Metal Focus, who has folks on the ground in Shanghai, reveals that the practical impact of the new rules are probably going to be pretty minimal. Although it will take time to understand exactly how the Chinese are applying the new rules. So it could be significant, but it might not be. We just don't know at this point. Now, as I explained it at the time, under this new policy, only large, licensed, state-approved companies with an annual silver production capacity of 80 tons and a credit line exceeding $30 million can legally export silver. And when the Chinese officials rolled out these rules, which went into effect January 1st, many analysts said it would lock hundreds of small and mid-sized exporters out of the system. And that would drastically decrease the amount of metal flowing out of China and possibly make it difficult for people who are trying to source silver. And there's a lot of people trying to source silver right now because there's a shortage. It would just exacerbate a squeeze that is already in progress. However, what these analysts failed to realize is that the Chinese government was already regulating and licensing silver exports. It already had these basic rules in place. These small and mid-sized exporters were already locked out of the system. The new rules were essentially tweaks in an existing framework. So it's not really correct to call this imposing import restrictions. It's better described as a transition to stricter export licensing management. The changes were really on the licensing side of things. And, they do this every 2 years. They update these rules. And this was the normal time that these rules were to be updated. So this is not anything that's out of the norm. So the Shanghai team at Metals Focus, and this Metals Focus is an independent consultancy. They're based out of London, and they do a lot of the survey and data work in the precious metals space. They do stuff for the Silver Institute. They do stuff for the World Gold Council. They do stuff for the World Platinum Investment Council. They're data crunchers, and they do a really good job. They have folks on the ground all over the world, analyzing, talking to people in the precious metal space. So they have a really good sense of what's going on. And the Shanghai team analyzed the list of approved companies that the Chinese government released as these new rules went into effect. And they compared the names on the approved list with the previous version, and they found that there were only a few changes. In fact, there are now 44 approved silver exporters for the 2026-2027 cycle. That's up from 42 in the 2025-2026 cycle. So we actually now have two more silver exporters than we did before. And it's also really important to note that China removed export quota restrictions on silver a few years ago, and that is still applicable in the rules today. Now, that said, it is possible that exporters are now going to have to obtain approval for individual overseas shipments. So every shipment may need bureaucratic approval. An outfit called Trivium China, which is a pretty good analyst of Chinese news, they reported that, quote, even without quotas or national security scrutiny, licensing adds friction and higher costs for exporters and their customers. So there is some impact here, okay? They're not necessarily trying to corner the silver market, but it could create some friction and it could impact exports. According to CIRS, a regulatory consulting firm, some Chinese licensing regimes can be structured as, quote, one license, one shipment, or they can be structured as, quote, one license, multiple shipments. Just depends on the category. The publicly available catalog summaries don't clearly establish that silver is strictly one order, one approval in all cases. So all of that to say, we really don't know how this rule is going to be applied and how much impact it's actually going to have on exports. In a statement, Metals Focus put it this way. They said, quote, this announcement should have little impact on global silver trade flows or on market tightness. However, there seems to have been a misunderstanding that led to this being interpreted as a positive signal for the price. So guilty here, right? And given China's history of controlling rare earth metals, and the way they've done it using export restrictions, this wasn't an unreasonable conclusion, right? But our biases may have gotten ahead of our reporting as journalists. The nuts and bolts of this policy shift just don't seem to support this conclusion, at least not now. For my part, I pretty much followed a lot of others who reported the policy change as a new regulatory scheme as opposed to a tweak in the existing system. That said, it remains, again, it's unclear how this export regime is going to play out in practice. The Chinese government could use the license approval process to limit exports, despite the repeal of export quotas. But it's not at all clear that is how it plans to manage the scheme. So, kind of have to wait and see. If you're distrustful of Chinese policy, it's perfectly reasonable to be wary here. But I think you're going too far. You're entering into the realm of hyperbole if you absolutely insist that, yes, the Chinese are trying to corner the silver market. We don't know that. And we don't want to operate on things we don't know. We want to be reasonable, right? We want to try to understand what's really going on. And here's the main point as far as I'm concerned. Whether or not the Chinese are going to try to restrict exports to whatever degree they may try to do that, it doesn't change the underlying realities in the silver market. There still isn't enough metal to go around no matter what the Chinese do. I've talked about this a lot on the show, but I really want to hammer this point home because I think it is one of the fundamentals that's underlying the silver market right now. Yeah, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out. I know from talking to folks over at Money Metals who are on the phones, business is booming. There are a lot of people, first-time precious metals investors right now. So that's the thing, right? There is a lot of exuberance around the market, but there are structural dynamics, and we've talked about these things. We've talked about the persistent inflation. We've talked about the United States' fiscal irresponsibility. We've talked about de-dollarization, the weaponization of the dollar. And in the silver market, we just don't have enough metal. The structural market deficit came in at 148.9 million ounces last year. That means that silver consumers used 148.9 million more ounces of silver than were produced by silver mines or recycling. And that drove the 4-year market shortfall to 678 million ounces. And the official numbers for 2025 aren't in yet, but the shortfall is expected to push the market deficit over 8,000 or over 800 million ounces. And that's the equivalent of an entire year of global silver mine output. So let me put this another way to make it really clear. Over the last 5 years, the silver market has consumed 6 years of global mine output. So there's a metal shortage. And, we've seen this silver squeeze. I've talked about the silver squeeze on the show. You might want to go back and listen to those episodes if you have not. I'll link to a couple of articles on the show notes page about the silver squeeze. But, they kind of ease it from time to time by moving metal from one hub to another, right? You move some metal from New York to London, and that kind of settles down the London squeeze. But then you end up with a metal shortage in Shanghai. You can't shuffle the metal around. It's like shuffling the the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Or I guess a better analogy, if you want to go the Titanic route, is the lifeboats on the Titanic. There's not enough lifeboats, right? There's not enough silver. So that means that silver users have to source metal from existing above ground stocks. They have to get silver from people who already have silver, and the people that are holding on to that silver, they're not real keen on giving it up at the current price, which is one of the dynamics that's driving the price of the metal higher. And of course, there still could be political influence in the silver market, and not just from China. The U.S. Geological Survey recently designated silver a critical mineral, and the USGS critical mineral list was established back in 2017, and it basically guides federal strategy on investment and mine permitting decisions. So the U.S. could use that designation to restrict exports on its own, in its own right, or maybe it'll affect the market in other ways and open up more mining. Unclear, right? So we need to be aware of these mechanizations, but we have to approach them kind of with a reasonable, measured understanding of what's going on. Don't get too high, don't get too low, right? It's important to keep an eye on government policy and how it might shape the market, but it's important not to overstate the impact of any given policy, especially before all of the information is in. So be aware, keep an eye on, but don't fall for every headline that comes across your desk. Be skeptical, even of me, right? Let's be honest. The precious metal space, there are some actors that like to use hype, right? They try to scare you. They try to create fear. I don't want to do that. I don't want to create fear. I think there's reasons to be worried about the future. There are certainly a lot of problems out there, but I don't want you to live in fear. Living in fear is not healthy. It's bad for your soul. It's bad for your psyche. So we don't want to do that. We want to be reasoned, right? And there's plenty of reasons to be excited about what's going on in precious metals without resorting to hype or things that are overstated. And this isn't the only story in the world of silver that I think was overplayed a bit. My colleague Joshua Glosson wrote about this over at moneymetals.com/news, and that is a rumor that the U.S. Mint is running out of silver. And that's been circulating, particularly on social media and on some of the blogs. And the hyped headlines imply that you're not going to be able to get any silver pretty soon, right? And to support this claim, people are pointing to a notice that was on the U.S. Mint website. And this is what it said. Notice. Due to the rapidly rising metal costs, silver numismatic products have been temporarily removed from sale as we evaluate pricing across our entire numismatic portfolio. Products will be placed back on sale as soon as prices are adjusted. American Eagle silver bullion coins remain available for purchase through our network of authorized purchasers. Note what the notice actually says. The Mint has removed silver numismatic products. Well, what is a silver numismatic product? These are collectible items, right? These aren't your regular bullion American Silver Eagle coins. They're collectibles. And here's the deal. When spot prices rise, sellers, and this includes the U.S. Mint, they have to update their pricing constantly so they're not selling at a loss, right? With the sharp rise in the price of silver over the last couple of months, the fixed prices for the U.S. Mint's high premium burnished or proof coins, these collectibles, they were no longer twice the silver spot price, but they were actually below the current spot price. So you get what I'm saying here. They have these special coins and these special rounds, and you've seen the ads for them. It's like this beautiful picture of the Olympics or whatever. I just pulled that out of the air. But these special coins, they price them at a given price, right? If you buy a silver eagle, you're paying the spot price of silver plus a premium. When you buy these collectibles, they usually set it at a set price, but it's way above spot, right? So it doesn't mean that the U.S. Mint is running out of silver. It's not running out of American silver eagles or other coins. In fact, the U.S. Mint doesn't even sell bullion American Eagle coins directly to the public. It sells them through its authorized dealers. And that's why you see that little note at the end of the message. You can still get your silver eagles. The items on the Mint website are collectible items. So as Josh explained it, in order for the Mint to adjust to the growing demand for all things silver and to continue profiteering off of the public with their high margin collectibles, government managers had to put a pause on silver sales until they could determine new product pricing that will last, such as through fiscal 2026. Therefore, the key takeaway about the Mint's decision to stop selling its marketable items is really this: governments are bad at business and probably ought to get out of it. In this case, an actual business would simply adjust its pricing on the fly, but government entity, right? However, people saw the announcement and immediately jumped to a conclusion, and it's based on a bias. We're running out of silver, right? We're caught up in the exuberance of this silver market. As Josh put it, conspiracy theories, hearsay, and precious metals dealer hype may have contributed to a misunderstanding that there is little to no silver available in the market. So, yes, there are some dealers that are having trouble sourcing silver. Some of the smaller shops may be low on inventory. But I can tell you this: I've talked to our CEO, Stephen Gleason, and he assures me that there is plenty of inventory at Money Metals. And I believe him because I've been to the office in Idaho. I've been in the bullion depository there. I've seen the amount of inventory that our company stocks. And in fact, we actually still have some junk silver. I talk about junk silver. I talk about this a lot, but I like junk silver. We're talking about pre-1965 dimes, quarters, and half dollars. And when those were minted prior to 1965, these coins were 90% silver. And we're still selling, I know, quarters under the spot price if you buy high enough volume. Speaking of junk silver, when I was prepping for the show last night, the melt value of a 90% silver 1964 quarter was over $17. Be a nice thing to get in your change, right? Anyway, if you want silver or gold, we can get it for you. We have plenty of silver eagles, although you might get a better deal buying silver bars or rounds. But you can check out all of our inventory and our pricing over at moneymetals.com. Really, the only issue we're having at Money Metals is we are seeing some delays in order processing due to the overwhelming volume of retail purchases and sellers as well that are choosing to do business with the company. So there may be some shipping delays. If you call, and you can call and talk to one of our precious metals specialists, 800-800-1865, you may have a delay getting somebody on the line, but we're working on remedying that problem. We've already hired 55 new employees since Christmas Day to help address the high order flow and the phone call volume. So all of that to say, the world's not running out of silver. We have a silver shortage, but we can get silver, right? It's going to cost a little bit more. We see that. The price is being driven much higher, but that inventory is available. And as Money Metals CEO Stephen Gleason recently wrote, Money Metals has not followed other dealers in cracking down on small customers by imposing order minimums and or jacking up order sizes required to receive free shipping. So we're still taking care of our smaller customers as well. Now, there's no guarantee we will not be forced to take steps at some point, depending on market conditions. But this would definitely, for us, be a last resort. However, and this is Stefan talking, given how much we value smaller customers generally, as well as first-time precious metals investors, that's why we would make this as a last resort. So, anyway, the key takeaway here is don't get caught up in the hype. Be calm, carry on, buy gold and silver. Beware of conspiracy theories and hyperbole. Again, there's plenty of reasons to be excited about precious metals right now without resorting to making stuff up just to hype the market. The dynamics are in place. There's every reason to believe that this bull market is going to continue. And I'm going to continue reporting, and I'm going to continue to try to be reasonable and measured. And I mean, I know some people, if folks in the mainstream probably listen to me and think, oh, this guy's way over the top, right? I'm talking about de-dollarization. But I am very careful and try really hard to emphasize the fact that when I talk about de-dollarization, I'm not talking about an imminent collapse of the dollar. I'm talking about a death by a million paper cuts. It's still significant, as I've talked about on the show often, right? Even a modest de-dollarization of the world economy would be a disaster for the United States because we depend on demand for dollars to prop up our profligate borrowing and spending. Money printing is necessary for this big government. And the fact that the world needs dollars allows the U.S. to print them because the world's demand absorbs those dollars. What happens if the world starts spurning dollars? The world doesn't want as many dollars. Well, I'll tell you what's going to happen. Those dollars are going to come back to the United States, and that means more inflationary pressure, higher prices here at home. You always end up paying this inflation tax. That's just the reality. And that's why I say every single week, you want to have real money. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and I generally don't give financial advice because I'm not any kind of certified financial planner or anything like that. I was just talking to a guy I play hockey with, and he recently retired, so he's got a bunch of cash. He sold his business, so he was asking me, hey, what should I do with all of this cash? And I said, keep in mind, this is just the dude in the locker room, okay? But if I were you, I would not hold a lot of that in cash. Anything that you aren't planning on spending in the next year or two, I definitely wouldn't hold in cash because your dollar is devaluing so fast and the inflationary pressure is about to step up, right? We know that the Federal Reserve is going to continue cutting interest rates. We know that the Federal Reserve right now is engaged in quantitative easing. So they've turned up the inflation machine. And Donald Trump is going to choose a new Fed chair pretty soon. And it's almost certain that the new Fed chair is going to be much more open to easy monetary policy than Jerome Powell even is. So I think we can expect inflation to continue to grow. That means the value of your dollar is going to continue to shrink. And if you're holding dollars, then every day you're losing purchasing power. So that was my advice to him. And I would never tell anybody to put all of your money in gold. No, I believe in balanced investing. I believe in the balanced portfolio, but not the 60-40 portfolio. No, we're much more in line with the 60-20-20 portfolio where you've got 20% allocated to precious metals and only 20% to bonds. But I do believe in a balanced portfolio. I do think it's unwise to put all of your eggs in one basket, but I also think it's unwise to save cash. You want to save in real money. And then if you want to grow money, then maybe you start looking at stocks. Mining stocks might not be a bad look right now. But yeah, don't save in dollars. Have real money. Have gold and silver. And as I said, we can get that for you. All you got to do is call 800-800-1865. You can talk to a precious metal specialist if you have questions. If you don't have questions, if you know what you want, I highly recommend not calling that number and just going to our website, finding what you want. We'll get it for you. We'll package it up. We'll ship it straight to you. Or you can store it in our precious metals depository out in beautiful Eagle, Idaho. But you want to do it today. And if you need to chat with somebody, but you don't want to talk on the phone, you can chat online over at moneymetals.com. So all of those options, but yeah, just carry on, stay calm, keep buying gold, keep buying silver, keep following moneymetals.com/news for all of your up-to-date information on the precious metals markets, delivered with integrity and accuracy, hopefully. Yeah. So I think that is a wrap for this episode of the Money Metals Midweek Memo. You can get more information on all of the things that I've talked about on the show today and a whole lot more over at moneymetals.com/news. And if you want to get the latest news and information relating to gold and silver right in your inbox, make sure you join the other 1 million+ people that are on our email list. Of course, you can subscribe to the Midweek Memo on your favorite podcasting platform. And when you do, you'll also be able to tune into our Market Wrap podcast every Friday, where you get a quick overview of the week in precious metals, along with conversations between yours truly and interesting people in the world of gold, silver, economics, and investing. This week, I'll be talking with Frank Holmes, so that should be a good discussion. Thank you again so much for listening to this show. Please do remember to share the episodes, give us those thumbs up, write those reviews. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your week, and we'll be back here to talk to you again next Wednesday.